We'll start with the news that Nicola Sturgeon was arrested as part of this investigation into £600,000 or so of donor money to the SNP. She's the third major figure in the party to have been arrested and released without charge as well. There's a limit to what we can say legally, so we can't really analyse the case so much, but we can, as our Scotland editor Chris Deerin did over the weekend in his piece about this, analyse the political implications. So, I mean, there's just more misery for Humza Yousaf, isn't there, Rachel? He's under pressure to suspend Nicola Sturgeon.
Yes, and not least because his former boss set an awful lot of precedents for him. If you kind of look back to all of the other cases where there's been either an investigation or a possible investigation into an SNP, MSP or MP, kind of Nicola Sturgeon's intervened every time to say that she thought it was right that they resign their membership or step away from the party at that time. You know, one example being Alex Salmond, another being Natalie McGarry, Michelle Thompson, when there are reports of just a possible police investigation into her then Finance Secretary Derek Mackay. She actually suspended his membership. And the problem for Humza Yousaf in all of this is that he's very connected to the former leadership. So it's not just a process question for him, it's a political question as well. So he's finding it a big struggle to put some distance between him and his predecessor. So for example, he was speaking on Laura Kuenssberg's show yesterday, Humza Yousaf, and was trying to sort of get in a story there that if there was this situation that rose where there was a minority Labour administration, the SNP would make it very, very difficult for Keir Starmer, unless Keir Starmer offered him another independence referendum. And that story just got lost immediately because of Nicola Sturgeon being arrested. But it's very because there's no distance between him and that administration, he's got no space to make any of the arguments that he wants to make.
Well, that's the thing. That's the irony, isn't it, for him? I mean, if one of his opponents in that SNP leadership campaign had won instead, it might have been easier for them to make these kind of very difficult decisions. You know, suspending Nicola Sturgeon and other senior members of the party while this investigation carries on. He can't do that. I mean, he was literally framed as the continuity candidate, but now that is such a curse to have continuity with the administration or the previous administration that is under so much scrutiny now.
Yeah, and I don't know if that speaks to some of the party divisions as well, because yes, he was framed as the continuity candidate, but it was something he also really leaned into, because Nicola Sturgeon was leader for a very long time and was very, very popular. Obviously, she had a lot of divisions with her predecessor Alex Salmond as well. So he probably has some kind of base in the party that he doesn't necessarily want to show them that he's kind of been quite aggressive towards, is excluding his former boss.
And for Labour, I mean, this is another gift, isn't it? I mean, I was up in Holyrood recently interviewing Anna Sarwar, and, they were trying to suggest that they were, not being complacent and all of those lines that you get. But there was a palpable feeling of excitement even in the corridors outside the Labour offices. I mean, they were waiting for a poll to come out that evening when I was there to see whether or not, Labour really was ahead of the SNP in the polls at last, and they were, it turned out. And, you could tell that they were very excited, but also the point was made to me, and it has been made to me by other people in the Labour Party down south, which is that it takes a bit of pressure off the challenge in England if they can win sort of Scottish seats in the teens.
That's an interesting point, that it does take the pressure off in other areas. It's also quite difficult for the SNP to kind of frame the current Scottish Labour Party as like the branch office, because they no longer have a Yorkshireman, for example, leading the party up there. Anna Sarr was very much a Glaswegian.
Not so different background to Humza Yousaf in terms of they went to the same school and they share quite similar politics.
And they also occupy a very kind of similar space in terms of the centre left with the SNP, so they're competing for a lot of the same space. Similarly with the Scottish Conservatives of kind of the centre ground. So Absolutely. It's so they're beginning to kind of absorb that space where some would say that's the competition of politics. Mm-hmm. I think they'd probably be quite nervous given it is very early on in kind of the SNP losing that support and their support plummeting. They probably know just how quickly it could snap back. So, if they say they're not complacent, you could kind of understand why, because there's still some distance to go between now and the next election.
Yes, and it's not so long ago that they were really in the doldrums, I mean, they're still in third place, right, in Holyrood in terms of actual MSPs. Ben, what do voters in Scotland think, first of all, should happen to Nicola Sturgeon?
To summarise, to be quite blunt, which is get out of the limelight. The thing with Nicola Sturgeon is she is a rarity in UK politics, and being a politician with a great deal of favourability. A lot of voters do like her, not least in England as well. I always remember this statistic from 2015, which is that roundly a lot of English voters during the leaders' debates of the 2015 election kept saying, of those who won, Nicola Sturgeon won the debates. Nicola Sturgeon topped the polls. This was being said by English voters. So she is, in the eyes of a great many voters, a competent debater, speaker, politician, charismatic, all the rest of it. She is well liked, not least in the country in which, for the past few years, she has been governing. Nevertheless, the investigations of the past few months really have, I suppose, changed public opinion a little bit. Her favourability numbers are down, yes, but she's still liked. That's the thing. She's still regarded as one of the Yes campaign's best advocates. Who else is there, really? But nevertheless, in terms of the investigations, most voters do want her to get out of the limelight, to be suspended from the SNP. Most Scottish voters say, yes, the SNP should suspend Nicola Sturgeon for the duration of the investigation, even though SNP voters themselves aren't as quite enthusiastic about that. Actually, SNP voters do not want Nicola Sturgeon to be suspended, but the SNP is not Scotland. More Scottish voters do. And that's the thing. So, yes, Nicola Sturgeon, still well-liked, still a roundly favourable figure with voters, perhaps still the Yes campaign's biggest advocate for now. But when it comes to the investigations, most voters are saying, get away, go away, basically.
How has this scandal affected the SNP standing in terms of public opinion in Scotland?
It's hard to say what proportion of the scandal investigation, financial affairs of the SNP, what proportion of it has been playing into public opinion recently. But we can say it's probably a pretty sizable chunk. And I'll give you these statistics. So the SNP has been leading in opinion polls for a decade, longer than a decade, I think. We're talking long before the first referendum on Scottish independence. I'd say about 2013, 2012 was the last time who was ahead in public opinion in Scotland was a contentious matter. Since then, they have almost, well, actually, yes, entirely been leading in the opinion polls. They often lead quite comfortably until recently, until the past 3, 4, 5 months. We've seen the SNP's vote share popularity amongst the public decline quite sizably. In some polls, it's been as much as a 2 to 3 point lead over Labour, which, by the way, is not much. That's not a substantial lead by any stretch of the imagination. Generally, though, if you trust in the poll trackers like Britain Elects, it's closer to 8 or 9 points, I suppose, maybe a little bit less now. And what that is pretty starkly different from what we've seen before. Basically, the SNP's vote, as a consequence, I think, yes, probably of the investigation and also the departure of Nicola Sturgeon and the rather unimpressive arrival of Humza Yousaf, a lot of SNP voters aren't that enthused about the cause as much as they used to be. They're not as exactly motivated to perhaps come out as they used to be. And what we are also seeing is a number of SNP voters going from SNP to Labour, which is propelling Labour's recovery in the country a little bit, but not in its totality. This is the thing in Scotland. In 2017, you saw a breakthrough for Jeremy Corbyn's Labour in England. They didn't win the election, by the way, but they did pretty well. In Scotland, they also came back winning, I think, half a dozen seats. But everywhere they won those seats. They won by the skin of their teeth. The thing in Scotland is there are a lot of marginal seats. So if the opinion polls move by 1 or 2 points, that's actually probably shifting about 5 to 10 seats. Scotland's a pretty, in one respect, for the past 10 years, 8 years, we've written it off almost as an SNP stronghold. But over the past 10 years, we've seen it develop into something completely not that. And as a consequence, a few percentage points here, a few percentage points there moves at half a dozen seats. You are seeing SNP voters going Labour. You are seeing SNP voters want to stay at home now. And as a consequence, Labour is recovering to such an extent they might go from 1 seat at the last election to between 10 to 20 That's a pretty sizable recovery. And that is maybe not entirely, but predominantly a consequence of, the SNP's biggest standard bearer falling on her sword and everything else following.
Well, we'll keep an eye on everything. And I think maybe on Thursday we might have the Privileges Committee report to speak about. Thanks so much for watching. We'd love to know what you think. Please make sure you leave your comments below. And if you enjoyed watching this podcast, you can watch more of our videos on our YouTube channel. And don't forget to like and subscribe.